This is the Page Publishing Book Club. But you knew that. You know that every time you hear this music. Am I right, Rob? Yeah. Love this music. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, and that's Rob Barris, our engineer. Over there, on the other side of the glass. How you doing, Robbie? We are celebrating the holiday season here in New York City, aren't we, Rob? It's impossible to get around. So many tourists around. It's crazy. All these people walking around saying, where's the tree? Where's the tree? Anyway, it's why we love New York City. We've got the greatest tree and everybody comes to see it. And we've got the greatest book club ever, the Page Publishing Book Club. And you know what? We're hoping as we head toward the end of the year that you are going to win yourself an interview right here on the PBBC by finally writing that book. What are you waiting for? That is the question. Felix Valenzuela took a decade to write his book. Yes, 10 years. It is entitled The Salsa Culture Invades America. And it took a while because this guy was an elected official in El Paso, Texas. This is a true and positive story about immigration, how working hard really can lead to the American dream. And his family is also part of American history. Felix, I don't think this book could come at a better time.
My grandpa fought with Pancho Villa, you know, the notorious general from Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. And he fled with my uncles, and they crossed the river into a city called Clint, where my mom was born. And they stayed as laborers, you know, worked around until the revolution was over. Then they moved 45 miles west to South El Paso, where I was born. And as I was growing up, was really the worst slum and maybe the whole state. And we lived in a 10 by 27 apartment that had no running water, no air conditioning, no heating, no toilet. And it was infested with cockroaches and rats. And we had 16 people living in that apartment. And let me tell you, I spoke no English at all. The first day of school, I was terrified. The teacher said recess, and all the kids went out. I didn't know what recess was. I went home.
Oh, jeez.
And my parents were working, obviously, and there were a lot of abandoned cars. You know, it was a slum area, so I got into one of the cars and fell asleep. About an hour or so later, a truant officer got me by the hair and took me to his car, and I thought I was being kidnapped. I was screaming and screaming. And he took me to the principal's office, where I was swatted 10 or 12 times. But it's the cultural background of Latinos, Mexican-Americans, Hispanics, people coming to the U.S. from Central and South America, Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico, really. I talk about all the traditions that were brought by these people, the customs, symbolism, the religion, and they just wanted to work over here. And luckily, my mom and my brother were employed by the railroad system, and that took us out of poverty. Bringing up, the positive side of immigration. In my case, I educated myself. I'm a former missionary in the country of Peru, you know, as a Vietnam veteran, state director, etc. But I have a son also that the first one from over here to be admitted to Yale Law School. And then he went to Notre Dame to get his Ph.D. Now he's got his own law firm. I have a younger daughter that's got her own counseling service. She's a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. My wife is the only grandma to graduate at the age of 56 from the university here in 2002. So the reason I wrote it was because, talk about coincidence, businessmen from New York came to El Paso to do business over here, and I took them across the border to look at an idea about Mexico. When they came back, they asked me, hey, is there a book about your people, you know, Mexican culture? And I said, well, why don't we go to Barnes & Noble and see what they have? Well, we went over there, and one title, that's it. So that's where the idea came. I said, why don't I put all these books into one book?
Right.
Okay. I also wanted to have my kids have this history of their background so they won't forget their roots.
What a great story, Felix. And I hear you. There's no shortage of opportunities to talk about your book and do book signings.
Yes, I'm scheduled at Barnes & Noble over here, and I'm speaking to the El Paso Women's Club. I'm going to be talking in the International Museum of Art. You know, word has really gotten around. I'll be going to New Mexico, the Barnes & Noble in Albuquerque and Arizona. So I've been promoting this here in the city because I have political still friends, City Hall, that are helping me promote it, and also veterans. You know, I'm a Vietnam veteran, so I'm just excited. And I understand, I understand Trump and all those characters are trying to cast us all as undesirables, okay? But we came to look for a better life, and a whole bunch of us, we succeeded.
Yes. You're proof of what can happen, and it's awesome. Resumes. How much do you hate writing resumes? I know I do. Ugh, it gives me such a headache. I have no patience for it. So if you're anything like me, you got to check out Evelyn Salvador. This is what she does for a living. She shares her vast knowledge in her book entitled Step-by-Step Resumes for All Construction Trades, Laborer, and Contractor Positions. Did you see a particular need for helping people in laborer and contractor positions?
Well, actually, I'm writing 23 profession-specific books, and this is one of them, one of the series. This and Human Resources are the first two that are out. Actually, the first book that was out, Step-by-Step Resumes, it's for all professions. It's a more generalized book. That was done about 7 years ago, and step-by-step cover letters. So this is a sequel, I guess you could say. I want to cover all professions, all positions, all functions within each position, and make sure everything's covered.
That's great. I mean, that sounds like quite an undertaking, but aren't there books that try to tell you how to do resumes, how to do cover letters? The question is, what sets you apart?
Actually, there's nothing out there like this because it covers everything. What I actually have done, the meat of the books, is what I call resume clip bullets. It writes the bullets for you, but not like a template. I call them a foundation. A template gives you bullets or lines that you have to fill in with information. These are bullets that write the entire bullet with absolutely every option possible within each bullet, and it's for every function within each position. So basically, they can just go through the functions and then just check off the bullets that are applicable to them and the options within them, and then put together their resume.
Are there things, generally speaking, mistakes that we make when we're doing a resume or a cover letter?
Actually, 98% of the public prepares their resume incorrectly, but resume writing is a trade, just like any other profession, and it takes years to perfect to be able to get, on top of the game where you can help others create a resume that puts them in the top percentile. And the main thing is people write more of a laundry list of the things that they've done, which is more like a job description. And that doesn't get you a position because everyone who's done that job has similar list of tasks that they've done. So what really gets the position is writing what we call a CAR statement, the challenge, action, and result. So basically what challenge you were given, the actions you took to make them happen, and then the results or the benefits, which is the biggie to the company and or clients, customers.
This is great, Evelyn. I mean, it couldn't come at a better time. There's plenty of people who need jobs.
Right. Yeah. I actually love writing, and I've been writing resumes for 25 years, and I am more into writing something that can help others right now, for the masses instead of one person at a time kind of thing. Mostly I'm doing executive resumes now, although I've done a lot in all professions, including obviously construction and human resources.
What are you doing to tell people that this is what you're doing?
I do have my step-by-stepresumes.com website. It's not e-commerce. It's really just a status a site that keeps up with the progress of the books as they're written. But stepbystepresumes.com shows you all of the books that I am in the process of getting out there.
All right, Evelyn. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Remember that Whitney Houston song, Rob? Such a beautiful song. And it's what I thought of when I talked with Deandra Flowers about her book entitled The Perfect Little Me, Past, Present, Future. Where did your process begin, Deandra?
I was a young girl, and, the direction that my life had kind of gone in from a child into teen years and young adulthood, I kind of struggled with a lot of self-esteem issues and just not really knowing who I was as a young girl. And even growing up into a woman, my body was growing on the outside, but then that little girl was still on the inside who hadn't blossomed out and who hadn't figured out who she was yet. And so I really felt like I was led to write this story and talk a little bit about how I overcame some of those obstacles in life and some of those barriers and hindrances that we go through with the self-esteem, with the bullying, with, bad relationships and different things like that.
Was it faith that helped you overcome those things?
It was definitely faith that helped me overcome my love for God and just being, I wasn't always that way. I didn't always recognize that God was guiding my life. But, as I got older and I began to discover who I was, it was definitely influenced by my love for God and my faith that has pushed me to overcome my fears and discouragements and things like that to move forward in my purpose. So absolutely.
Do you work with kids or do you work with people?
I do. I'm a registered nurse, so I've been in healthcare my entire life, but I work with people. It seems to come naturally. It seems to happen in a sense that I end up encouraging people and motivating people without really trying very hard. So I just dig right in there and go for it. When I feel like the need is there and someone needs to be uplifted and to know that they are beautiful, they are awesome, they have all of this greatness on the inside, and not to let anyone tell you that you cannot be who you are. I take that very personal, and I use every opportunity to do that.
Well, now you have a book. It's almost like a handbook.
Yes, I wanted the book to be, I didn't want to fill the book with things that really wasn't usable to everyday life. I didn't want to fill it with a bunch of words that didn't mean anything. So I definitely prayed before I wrote the book, and I wanted to begin the ending of the book. I wanted to kind of add some interaction in there for people to evoke a thought process, to plant a seed for people to really think about things that will help them begin that process to discovering who they are.
So there's actual practical things that they can do.
There is, and that's what the book is all about. The book is about those practical things in everyday life that we can do, that we can start with. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and it really takes time, and it really takes courage to push forward. And so there are simple things that we can do to kind of begin that.
Like?
A lot of times, we criticize ourselves. We find things that we don't like about our bodies or that we don't like about our attitudes or our personalities. And my belief is that there are things that we can change and there are things that we can't change that God created us to have unique to us. And so accepting the things that we have and that make us who we are and embracing those things is, to me, it's the first step to really discovering who you really are. When you begin to accept yourself and love yourself, you really put yourself at an advantage to really discover what all you have to offer for life.
Very good, Deandra. And with that, we are going to take a very short break. When we come back, a story about a Norwegian model and a mobster, weaving social commentary into fantasy and mystery on board a cruise ship. Do not go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Hey, thanks so much for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Christine Roth decided to write a thriller love story for her first book. It's called Tainted Heritage. And like so many other people, this was something you always wanted to do, right, Christine? But just didn't have the time.
I actually have wanted to write pretty much all my life. I used to do like really good in creative writing in school in Norway, where I'm from.
Uh-huh.
And, but, you know, I had children, work. I haven't had much time until now that I'm retired. So I just sat down one day and started to write, and the story just came unfolded. You know, it came out of my head. The story took a life of its own. I read a book on writing by Stephen King, and he said the same thing. You just uncover the story as you go.
And that's what happened to you. It wasn't like you had something preconceived. You sat down, you started writing, the words came, and next thing you knew, you had a book.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I was plotting sometimes. I woke up like early in the morning with like a plot in my head, you know. Sometimes I had to think about which direction it's going to take, but it was pretty much like that. It pretty much just came out of my head.
All right, Tom, what's your book about?
Well, it's about the supermodel Lisette falling madly in love with a playboy, a billionaire, Tony McGregor. And Tony is very accomplished on the outside, but he's also very vulnerable because of his heritage, as he comes from a mob family. And after a while, the sweet romance that the two of them have intersect with the ugliness of the mob. And Lisette sees something that she shouldn't see and had to run for her life.
How'd you find Paige?
My husband actually found him. I think he heard of you guys at a radio station or something. Very good experience with me. I sent my manuscript to 2 other publishing companies, but I'd never heard anything, and I thought, oh, this is tough when you're breaking through with your first book, but Paige has been absolutely wonderful.
Is this what you do now? This is what you want to do all the time, is write?
Yeah, and you know, I've always liked to write. And I used to write presentations, you know, when I was working in banking. I used to write presentations and do lectures for the branches, you know, what we were doing at the back offices and stuff like that. But it's also, I also had a language barrier because this is my second language. Oh. And when I first came to the U.S., it was hard for me to write in English, although I've learned English since 6th grade in Norway. I spoke it well, but now I don't know if I could write in Norwegian anymore now that I can write in English just fine.
Well, you got a classic love story here, I'll tell you that. And by the way, there's more to come. Do you know what Vanishing Angle is? I didn't have a clue until I talked to Joanne Warren, and she explained it to me. And it also happens to be the title of her book.
Vanishing Angle is a nautical term, and that's kind of embedded in the book as to what the meaning is. I work in the cruise industry. I worked in it for over 20 years, and obviously a lot of times I dream about cruise ships and things that are happening, and this just happens to be a dream that it's one of those ones that you didn't forget, and you woke up the next day, and I dreamed it several times, and so I thought, okay, trying to tell me something, so I just put it all down on paper, and from there it just took on a life of its own. What
was the dream?
Well, the original dream was just based on a cruise ship and going overboard. I thought the dream itself, as it played out, I think it incorporated people I'd met along the way in my professional life, and it kind of, you know, came into the whole fabric of the story. And then I thought, well, you know, it's kind of a bad story, and I've always liked to write, so I just started writing it. It did take completely different twists along the way, and the end did not turn out at all like what I imagined it would be. And I kind of appreciate that more because it had a life of its own that went beyond my original conception. And I'm happy at the end of the way it did.
What is the story? The story's about a singer, Allie Summer.
At one time, originally she and her twin sister were members of a band, and she had started being stalked by someone they could never identify, and it became very, fearful for her. So she left that life, and she had always also had a passion for boats and being on the water. So she decided to venture into this other line of work, became successful at that. And unfortunately, the stalker found her again and ended up being on the same ship that she was on. And mysterious things started happening, and people started dying. Women were going overboard, and they couldn't really connect the dots until later on that it was connected to her stalker. And then it just how events unfolded and what took place, and people were harmed. And in the middle of all of that, she meets the captain, and they start a romance, and then it just all, accumulates with a confrontation at the end. And, hopefully there were enough characters that were suspects that it keeps people guessing throughout. And I have to laugh because as people read it, they will send me texts and go, I know it's this person, I know it's that person. And, okay, that's what you want to do, okay. But, it was my first outing trying to do something like this, and hopefully, I've written a good enough story that'll keep people interested, because I know it is a little bit long, but it does read pretty fast.
Well, are you still on the cruise ships now, or what?
Well, I actually don't work on the ships. I work in the headquarter offices, and yes, that's still my full-time job. I have enlisted the help of a lot of my friends who do work in the industry to, get the word out. And there's a company that provides supplies to the gift shops on board who has a contact there. And I'm trying to work something out where I can get them to put this out there in the gift shops on board the cruise ships, because I think it would be kind of a natural fit. And other than that, it's just word of mouth, social media, and, you guys here with the radio spot and press releases and just doing all I can.
Wow. What a great example of using all the people you know and all the resources you have to get your book out there. Finally, Robert Brillmeyer has a little experience writing both fiction and nonfiction, but he wisely decided to publish his third book of fiction entitled Burnished Barbarians with Page. So how'd that other publisher work out for you there?
Their publishing is okay, and their bookkeeping is okay, but I felt I wasn't getting much of publicity or attempts to sell those books, so I thought I'd try another publisher, and I heard about Page, and I realized, or I think at least, that Page is probably more well-known on the East Coast than it is in the Midwest. So I'm doing a little bit of advertising here in Texas on my own, but obviously hoping that Page will do a little bit of advertising for me elsewhere. They tend to send out books to people who might be interested in the book, so they have copies of it. So that's advertising in a way. Well,
I mean, the best advertising, honestly, is you going out to libraries, bookstores, grade schools, wherever, your audience is, and offering a book signing, reading, talking about being an author, getting on the local radio station there and the newspaper, stuff like that. I mean, because nobody talks.
Being an obtrusive figure.
What do you know? It's not obtrusive. I mean, I'm sure your story is worth sharing, and you have a way of talking about it that nobody else is. I mean, that's just, don't you think that's true?
That's true. I can't disagree with that.
Yes. So what's Burnished Barbarians about?
Oh, now you've gotten yourself into something of a problem here, because it's hard to classify it in one of the usual categories. For example, there is a fantasy element with gods and goddesses and strange mystical happenings, that sort of thing. But it's also an adventure story about the young man Druska and the problem he has, and all sorts of blood and thunder, even a mystery element to it, because all through the book they're talking about this blemished barbarian And the question is, does this person exist, and is he going to be the horrible thing that they predicted? And we find I don't answer that question until the very last page of the book, where people don't expect to find the sudden explosion or suddenly flash of light, which shows that the mystery has been facing them all along, or the solution has been facing them all along, and they simply haven't looked in the right place. It's also one of these coming-of-age stories. Druce begins at the beginning of the story. We find him as an 8-year-old. At the end of the story, he's 19. So he has a rather vivid set of experiences. He's doing things that are necessary for him to survive, but you look at him and you say he's also being very, very evil in some ways. So Druce, who's the main character, is the focus of the book, and everything builds around that one character and what happens to him between his early childhood, and his death at his death at 19. He dies at 19.
Aww.
One of the things that this book does is to put in criticisms of the present society. And these are things that I wanted to say, but you can't say them directly. So I put them into the story in ways that I hope the reader would pick up. And it gives me a chance to talk about the society in general. Now, the rest of the story, much of the adventure and so on, were ideas that were sort of like nebulous in my head. And finally, I took all these different parts and put them together into a single novel. So I end up with a whole lot of different things, like the fantasy, the adventure, the violence, the coming of age, and the criticism of the society, all in this one book.
All right, Robert, and I'm sure there's plenty of criticism to go around. And that about wraps up this edition of the PPBC. Boy, time flies, doesn't it? Thank you so much for hanging out with us or downloading us at 710WOR.iHeart.com. We have no shortage of first-time and long-time authors to bring you each and every single week, with the hope one of them will inspire you to get going on your first book. So you come back next week for another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Same time, same place. 710 WOR. Have a great weekend.